Hello everyone and welcome to our special webinar presentation on preparing for a video pre-screening interview at the OSCE. This presentation is part of the OSCE's webinar outreach program. Every month, the Department of Human Resources and the Recruitment Unit prepares a presentation with relevant topics to potential applicants like you. These presentations will contain tips for applications, interview preparation, and overall information on how we run our recruitment processes. Whether you're interested in the OSCE or other multilateral international organizations, the best practices shared in our program will be valuable to you and any other potential applicants. We will also create sessions on current opportunities such as monitoring officer opportunities, webinars, and other thematic areas. In the meantime, please become familiar with the WebEx platform by checking the chat box at the bottom right of your screen where you can ask questions to our guests later today. If you happen to be listening to our recording, congratulations, you may be selected for a SONRU interview with us as well, which means that we are using this recording to help you prepare to put your best foot forward and best present your experiences and how you may align with a position here at the OSCE. Moving on to the next slide. One thing you need to do right now is actually get pen and paper to jot down some of the ideas, some of the insights that we are going to share with you today. Again, this presentation will be made available via a recording to everyone who registered, and this recording will be available to any potential applicant to the OSCE. I am going to start by introducing myself. I am the person to the right side of the screen. My name is Gustavo Araujo, and I'm the Chief of Recruitment here at the OSCE. And I've had experience working in human resources for multiple organizations, including the United Nations Development Program, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and now the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Prior to joining International Civil Service, I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers co-managing final rounds interviews for their advisory consulting business in the United States. It's also my pleasure to have two outstanding individuals to speak with us today. One of them will introduce herself right now. Rebecca, could you tell us more about yourself?
Hello, and thank you, Gustavo. My name is Rebecca Gangnus. I am part of the client success team here at SONRU. So I work as part of a video interviewing provider, and I help clients get the most out of the system. I've been working here for over 4.5 years, and I'm really looking forward to doing this webinar with you today.
Thank you, Rebecca, for always being so cooperative and to collaborate with us to actually support potential candidates and individuals who are going through the process right now. Moving on to the next slide. We are going to cover a lot of topics today. These are some of the topics that we'll be covering with you. We're going to start by telling you exactly what are video interviews. Then we're going to move on to why do we use video interviews. We're going to move on as well to talk about the hiring manager perspectives, and that's why we have a special guest with us today. Then we'll cover what happens if I am selected. Moving on to what are asynchronous interviews typically like? And how do I prepare beforehand? What do I do during the interview? We're going to end up with important tips and give you some hints on how to answer the types of questions typically asked in 3 minutes or less. And at the end, we're going to introduce you a few private sector and best practice resources that you can leverage whether you're interviewing for a position at the OSCE, any international organization, or any other organization in the private sector that actually happens to use this technology. Just moving on right now. A lot of individuals may have heard the term asynchronous interviews. But before there were asynchronous interviews, we had synchronous interviews, meaning that in synchronous interviews, as described under the gray dot on the screen, that means that we have interviewer and interviewee online at the same time. These interviews tend to run by a video conference, Skype, or SONRU or other type of provider. That means that both individuals are talking just like a normal video conference conversation. Now, for asynchronous interviews, meaning not at the same time, we have a candidate and a recruiter or a hiring manager not at the same time in front of the computer screen of the mobile device. In other words, you may be a candidate who receives an invitation to respond to questions that you see on the screen, and these questions will be recorded. At a later time, a hiring manager, a recruiter, or someone on the panel will review your responses. And that's why this interview is called asynchronous, because it doesn't happen with individuals at the same time. Throughout this presentation, you're going to see tips that are valid both for synchronous interviews and asynchronous interviews. That's why you're going to have the two dots, the gray dot and the blue dot. Why do we use video screening interviews? Well, there are multiple advantages to using video pre-screening interviews. Please note that these interviews, though, we're talking about the ones that we don't have people in front of the computer or in front of the mobile device at the same time. They are simply pre-screening interviews. In other words, they should not be replacing the real interview that should take place later. And this real interview, live interview, will take place whether it's in person or also via a video technology. Some of the main advantages of using these pre-screening video interviews are the following. The recruiters and the candidates are not online simultaneously, meaning that they can either complete the interviews or watch the recording at different times as convenient, as long as it takes place within the appropriate timelines. The interviews can also be completed remotely, meaning that there's no need for traveling, saving both the organization time and money, and also allowing candidates to participate in the recruitment process without much disruption to their work or personal obligations. The interviews can also be completed using a computer or mobile device like an iPad. So in other words, we have flexibility of interview completion when it comes to location, technology, and timing. Prior to giving more details, we do have a special guest here today because it's very important for us to let you know the hiring manager's perspective in the use of SONRU. So I'd like Lisa to introduce herself and tell us more about her.
Greetings, candidates. My name is Lisa Sutton. I'm the Director of Internal Oversight at the OSCE. Just to give you a bit of a glimpse, internal oversight provides assurance and advisory services to the organization to help make it stronger. We oversee the entire organization, including its numerous field locations and institutions. I just think I could give an impression in terms of why working at the OSCE is so fascinating and a tremendous opportunity. We have an exceptional mandate working for peace, security, and stability. The colleagues that we work with are energetic, talented, and I think what we really feel in the OSCE is that it's an organization where you can really make a difference. You can really get things done. We have excellent supportive managers, and from this point of view, I think the OSCE is just an exceptional place to work. In terms of recruiting, I have used SONRU on numerous occasions to recruit to my team, and I see many advantages of it from a hiring manager's perspective. The written application is one element and an important element to any recruitment, but really apart from the letter of interest, there's limited opportunity for candidates to really demonstrate why they're interested in the post and how they can fit. Video pre-screening SONRU interviews for me give me the opportunity to hear how candidates can conceptualize how their experience can fit for the job. They give me the opportunity to review many more applications in a lot more detail than I would normally be able to do so, including from participating states that may be less represented in the organization. And finally, I think it also gives the opportunity to look at candidates that look like they have great potential on paper, but maybe haven't really conveyed themselves through their application in terms of how they would fit for the job. So for me, I think they're just an exceptional tool. And from what I've also heard of candidates participating in them, they also really appreciate and find the tool very modern. So good luck and thanks.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for sticking around for us today. So in summary, as Lisa has described, SONRU video pre-screening interviews has actually helped us increase our ability to identify talent from large pools of candidates from all participating states and partners for cooperation. We're also able to actually screen more candidates, allowing hiring managers to make better decisions. We also have an extra data point of information to hiring managers in the panel beyond, before, or after the written technical assessment, and we can have more evidence of fit for the role of the organization, processing candidates in a standardized, structured, and transparent manner. And we're going to be providing more details on how to prepare very, very soon. What we're going to cover now is what happens if I am selected. So the first thing that happens is if you are selected, you will receive an invitation email with availability confirmation request. What we're going to do is to send you information stating that, hey, you have been selected for a SONRU interview. Congratulations on that. And we would like you to confirm your interest in the position and the fact that you would want to follow up in interviewing with us, a pre-screening interview via SONRU. Then what you need to do is you need to follow the link to the SONRU and read the introductory information, meaning that we'll tell you all you need to know in order to understand the process, answer the questions, and how this fits into the recruitment process overall. And another thing to remember is to take note of the deadline, because these interviews need to be submitted back to us approximately within 7 days after you receive those interviews. This is a very similar process between OSCE and many other international multilateral organizations. They use SONRU as one of their pre-screening techniques. What are asynchronous interviews typically like? Here at the OSCE, we may have up to 5 questions, and people typically have 5 business days to complete interviews, including the weekend. So for example, if you receive your SONRU invitation with confirmation on Monday, we will give you until the end of Sunday to complete the interview, so we can have the hiring managers and the panel members watch the recordings and decide whether or not we can move you to the next phase of the selection process. Typically, we have an average amount of 3 minutes for you to answer the questions. These questions, they may be technical questions in nature, or they may be related to competency-based interview questions, or they may be simply related to your motivation to apply for the position. We do not tell you what questions will be given in advance. However, by using SONRU, you will be able to practice with sample questions in advance of completing the recorded interview. And we're going to give you more details on that very soon. Best practices indicate that we should use SONRU for a maximum of 12 to 15 minutes length. That's why we typically have questions that run between 3 to 4 or 5 minutes for you to answer. There's always a standard question at the end, which is something in the lines, is there anything you'd like to tell us regarding your application for the position that you find interesting for us to know? Or tell us more about yourself and your interest for the position. Or is there anything extra you'd like to know? So at the end of any SONRU interview, you will be given the opportunity to tell us more about yourself and your interest, and I would highly recommend that you use these opportunities. Moving on to the next step. We do have here lots of tips for you on what to do before, during, and after the interview. Rebecca, are you with us right now?
I am indeed.
Very good. So Rebecca now is going to run by us all of the tidbits, the ins and outs of what you should do before and during the interview in order to prepare. Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gustavo. Yes, so here at SONRU, we have done quite a lot of research and collected a lot of feedback from potential candidates and candidates that have gone through the process. So we've sort of collected a few hints and tips and guides that I hope you will find useful to go through. So things to do before and during the process, as Gustavo mentioned. The first would be choose a quiet room. So make sure, you might think that you have a little quiet corner, but do pay attention to where you're recording. Make sure that you find a nice quiet area, that you won't be disturbed away from everyone else. Turn off all the sound and notifications on your phone and on your laptop or devices that you're using. So that would be the first little bit of advice. From then you can move on and make sure to really spend some time, test your equipment, see what works best for you, to make sure that you're going to be comfortable using the application. So whether it's through your laptop on your browser or if you're on a mobile device, you'll have the opportunity to test that everything is fine. From here then, make sure that you find some uninterrupted time. So once you have your quiet room and you begin your testing, you make sure that you have set aside time for yourself to complete. Rather than taking maybe a 15-minute tea break, make sure that you allow yourself a good 30 minutes to really get comfortable. As Gustavo mentioned before, we will be looking at you get a chance to practice. So do give yourself plenty of time so that you'll be nice and relaxed going into the process.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And just as a caveat to all of you, a lot of those tips may sound common sense to you, but as we all know in reality, common sense is not common to everybody, which means that it is our responsibility to make sure that the playing field is leveled for all candidates and all potential applicants so they understand and maximize their ability to actually make a positive impression at this stage of the recruitment process. That's why now we're moving on to another section of what should I do before. Rebecca, take it up.
Yes, some things do seem quite straightforward, but you'd be surprised when you're sitting there preparing and the things that you might forget. So one of those things would be obviously make sure to research the organization, check the website. LinkedIn is fantastic. The team there is very active. Precedent release, anything that you would find helpful. I'm sure Gustavo might have a little bit more around that as well.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. I think it's very important that candidates have a really clear understanding of the organization per se, the mandate of the organization, the areas of work, and most importantly as well, no matter what kind of job you are applying for, from a assistant all the way to a director or head of mission, how your job contributes to making the organization's mandate move forward and contributes positively to the activities of the OSCE on all its regions. Meaning that it's important that you're just not applying for a job, that you are applying to make an impact, and that you understand, that you show us that you have read information about what is the strategy for the organization moving forward. Where does the organization fit in the multilateral international organization environment? What are the main activities in the areas of concern at this current time? And how do you, in the position that you'd like to have with us, would actually make an impact in showing us that you would be a good fit here? Moving on to the next one, Rebecca.
Thanks. Yes, so you've now done your research, you're all prepared, we've followed tips, we've chosen a quiet room. Next thing to think about, take a look around, you've done your tests, you're uninterrupted, take a look at your surroundings. Although the team is well trained and they're focusing purely on your answers, we want to make sure not to distract them in any way. So tidy up your background. We've seen all sorts of things. So if you're in a spare room, make sure maybe where you're facing has a sort of clean background. It will just help you present yourself as best as possible. In addition to this, make sure that you have everything prepped beside you, because once you start your real interview, there won't be a way to stop and start again. So get a pen and paper to help you take notes. You can jot down notes during the reading time. to really structure your answers. Also, another thing which isn't on this, but you see the little cup there, have a glass of water or something there close to you, because when you're talking to yourself uninterrupted, you know, you want to make sure that you have a nice clear throat and you have everything close by.
That's a great point, Rebecca. Another thing that's important, Rebecca alluded to, is the fact that if you have paper and pen or pencil next to you during the interview, we typically give about a minute to a minute and a half, sometimes even 2 minutes for the individual to actually read the question before having to answer it. And there's a countdown clock, meaning that if you read the question quickly enough, you may have 30 seconds or more to jot down a few words to help you structure your answer, but the time that the 3 minutes is allotted to you to answer the question. Again, this is a lot less stressful than it sounds, to be honest. I myself have participated in numerous interviews, have watched numerous SONRU interviews myself, and people are becoming even more and more familiar with using this type of technology, because nowadays everyone talks and using FaceTime and Skype and other video technologies to communicate, or even leaving like audio recordings as messages to their friends on WhatsApp. Moving on to the next set of slides, Rebecca.
Yes, so actually going from that, you know, you hopefully a lot of people are getting more and more familiar with recording themselves. So something to think about, same as when you're recording yourself, speak in a conversational tone or voice. When you're recording your video, nerves will always show, and you know, that's not a negative. It would be strange if you weren't a little bit nervous. So do just take it as a conversation with yourself. You're looking at the question. This question will be in front of you the whole time, so you can answer in a really relaxed manner. Accents, you know, are not a problem. We here have a lot of different colleagues as well, and through OSCE and the team that I've worked there, many people are not native English speakers, so that is something to really embrace. You know, the questions aren't testing you on that. They want you to be able to present your knowledge of the job that you're applying for the role, and not test your English skills.
This is very true, Rebecca. Thank you for highlighting that, because there is this assumption that this is pretty much to test people's English fluency. Obviously, we want to make sure that you know how to talk about your job, you know how to talk about yourself, and you know how to provide structured and coherent answers about the work and the impact that you'd like to make at the organization, or how your previous experiences align you to actually hit the ground running or be successful here. But by no means this is any kind of English fluency test. As I mentioned, most people at the OSCE are not English native speakers. English happens to be the working language of the OSCE, but let's not forget that we have multiple other official languages in the organization as well.
Exactly. And going from speaking in a conversational tone, the next thing would be eye contact. So although there isn't a person sitting across from you, make sure to look at the camera. You don't have to look at it constantly, but do check in as often as you can. With that also, smile if and when appropriate, depending on the question being asked, but do act natural or as natural as you can. So yeah.
Now let's move on to other important tips. Rebecca.
Yeah, so actually these sort of flow. So the next thing would be treating it like a regular face-to-face interview. So things like that, making a little bit of eye contact, looking into the camera, smiling. You talk the way you would present yourself in a formal interview as well. So make sure that you're presenting yourself as best as possible. To help with that part, there is an area which Gustavo actually mentioned at the start there as well. You will have the opportunity to practice. So not just practice using your equipment, whatever method you're going to use to record the video, but also there is an area where you will receive 2 practice questions, and you can do those questions, you can do practice as many times as you need to get comfortable with seeing yourself, hearing yourself, recording yourself, looking at the camera. So there's an area where you have ample opportunity to test it out and practice, practice, practice to make sure that when you go through to your OSCE interview, it will all become a little bit more natural to you. And in line with that, be confident. You know, you've been chosen for a reason to do the video. As Lisa mentioned also earlier on, you know, it's her opportunity. Through the video, she gets to see more candidates at an earlier stage, and also maybe people that on paper they've looked well but haven't had a chance to present themselves. So really be confident in your ability. You've been chosen to do this so you can really present yourself well.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up again, Rebecca. It's really important that you understand the competitive nature of positions in multilateral and international organizations. We do also have an obligation to use a robust recruitment process with multiple steps. We collect evidence, information from candidates, from the pre-screening interviews to a pre-written test, to an anonymous test, to a live interview, whether it's in person or via video as well. We look at the resumes and CVs via the official application forms and nominations from participating states, which means that we are collecting multiple pieces of data to justify the recommendation of individuals to the Secretary General, the heads of missions, and people who make the final decision whether or not these individuals are a potential fit for the organization. Moving on to more tips.
Great. So these, again, you know, are for really any sort of recording, not just for an asynchronous video recording, obviously, but you've got the opportunity to do this video. So to help you build your confidence is dress professionally. So you do have to think that you are presenting yourself for a role within OSCE. So make sure that you would present yourself the way you would if you were meeting someone for a face-to-face interview. Things to think about will be, you know, when you're recording yourself, you've probably seen it in photographs or videos, and think about what you might choose to wear. Neutral colors look well on camera. You know, bold patterns might distract, although, as we said, the reviewing team aren't really looking at that, but, you know, you want to make sure that they're focusing on your answers. Something that people often forget, and it seems like something simple, but using light to your advantage, and myself and Gustavo have talked about this previously as well, you know, placement, where you're sitting, where the window is, having light coming from the back that's darkening you out, you know, that's possibly you want to avoid those sort of things. Have maybe a desk lamp beside you if it's a little bit dull. And also, if, like myself, you are a glasses wearer, think about how light reflects as well. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're presenting yourself as best as possible, and light is an amazing way to help you do that. You can really use it to your advantage.
Very good. Thank you for that, Rebecca. And just finalizing?
Yeah, so the very last one that we have is nonverbal communication. So again, this is something that comes up time and time again. Again, I also gesture and talk with my hands. So something to think about are these things. So be mindful of how you're sitting. You know, if you have your arms crossed, that would be a little bit threatened. So really, another thing, I think Gustavo again mentioned it to me before, having your feet flat on the ground. Simple things like that can really help to ground you and also present yourself very well. Posture is great, and again, if you do move your hands, maybe you can sort of cup them instead, and because sometimes your hands are cut off and you mightn't even think about that on a camera, and suddenly you only see strange movements in the background. So these are little things that you can practice during the practice session questions and really focus in on those, how you're presenting yourself.
Very good. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Again, we need to highlight one more time. Those tips are not necessarily related to people taking off points because of some things you do and don't do. Our goal is to make sure that we get information from you. Your goal is to make sure that you minimize distractions around you so that the interviewers can actually focus on your answers and your answers alone. Okay? So moving on to the next slide. One thing that's really interesting that's being actually found by psychological research is the fact that obviously everyone is nervous in speaking, particularly public speaking situations. Some research indicates actually that people's greatest fear, even beyond death, may be speaking in public. And obviously, speaking to a camera without anyone on the other side and feeling that you're being recorded may make people feel very, very uncomfortable with the idea and situation. There's this really interesting article called Get Excited, Reappraising Pre-Performance Anxiety and Excitement by Dr. Alison Brooks that was actually posted at the Journal of Experimental Psychology that actually helps us try and actually change the mindset in order to better prepare for any kind of interview. So it's natural to be nervous. Just make sure that you prepare well and use this trick. Try and frame anxiety as excitement because both anxiety and excitement feels very similarly, physiologically speaking, in your body. So your idea is to change the thinking of, instead of I'm very nervous about this, is I'm excited about the opportunity to apply for this position and be considered. That means that you're changing your mindset from a threat mindset to an opportunity mindset. How can you go from anxious to excited? I think the answer is simple. Prepare, prepare, prepare. And how do you prepare? One of the main ways to prepare for any kind of interview is reviewing the job description and anticipate questions. I always play that game when I am myself a candidate in any kind of recruitment process. If I am the hiring manager, what am I really looking with the job description that I have? What are the skills, abilities, and competencies? How do I actually ask questions that will give me information that the individuals will actually be able to hit the ground running or have the ability to learn very quickly, have the potential to come in and make a contribution? Another thing that's important as well is try and anticipate technical and non-technical questions because we don't tell them in advance. So it's your opportunity to actually shine by telling us how well you prepared by being able to answer a question in a structured manner, which is something very important in any kind of interview. Speaking of answering questions in a structured manner, this is the topic of this slide. How do I also answer these questions in 3 minutes or less? This is particularly speaking in asynchronous interviews or even to some extent in some real life interviews in case the time is limited for some questions. The important thing is for you to be succinct and to the point, meaning give details that matter, give us the context, give us the action, and give us the results associated to the answer that you're giving. In the case of competency-based interviews, it's very important that you look back at examples from your past experiences that show that you have the potential to actually grow into the role quickly or that you can hit the ground running. In other words, have you accomplished the tasks described in the questions? If so, how do you show the hiring manager and the panel members that you've done that in a proficient and professional manner? If not, what are the similar tasks and situations in the past that may show evidence to these individuals interviewing you that you could be a great fit for the job? Again, try and do that in a succinct and to the point manner. Another important factor is emphasize your role. We do understand that in a lot of cultures, it may be a little complicated or uncomfortable to actually talk about your role, your impact, what you did. However, for competency-based interviews, it's very important that you actually tell the hiring manager and the panel members your role in describing events, in describing impact. If you're talking about working on teams, if you're talking about making a contribution, okay, mention the team, mention how you collaborated and worked together. However, it's important that you also focus on what was your contribution. How did you make the processes more efficient? How did you actually collaborate with individuals? And what did you bring to the table? Because this is very important for us to know when it comes to assessing potential fit for this organization or any other organization. Moving on, we will be holding in the near future a webinar on preparing for interviews, and we're going to cover these topics as well. Just to give you a brief overview, you can use the SMART, the STAR, or the CAR technique to answer questions in 3 minutes. Because we only have 3 minutes in very little time for this particular webinar, I'm just going to focus on CAR today. Just look at the context. When people ask you questions, for example, in communication, have you ever had conflicts with coworkers? What happened? How did you solve these conflicts? What was the outcome of the situation? What would you have done differently? So make sure that you describe the context. Make sure that you actually mention your action to solving the problem. Make sure that you mention the results, including if there were no results, that's okay. Mention what you learned from the situation so that you show that you are a professional who has potential to grow and learn from the experiences. Again, we're not going to get into details about this particular step of the recruitment process per se, but please check back on our OSCE talent acquisition newsletter so that you can receive information on when we're going to be holding our Preparing for Interviews webinar. Moving on to the next slide, it's very important that you check the job description carefully for the competency definitions and levels of proficiency needed, since they vary by position. You can find this information in the case of the OSCE online. All you have to do is look through our website, and you can also check jobs.OSCE.org for more information. You can also look at, for example, if you look at the core competencies, we have communication, collaboration, analysis and decision-making, planning, initiative taking, and flexibility. Try and come up with questions that would actually tap into these competencies. If you go online as well, you can simply Google CBI or competency-based interviews, questions on communication, collaboration, leadership, strategic thinking, and you will find a lot of tips. So it's very important that you prepare in advance so you can think of examples, okay? And please be mindful as well. This is not a acting kind of situation. This is for you to let us know that you have experienced in the past situations that make your application relevant for the position. Moving on to the next slide. What kinds of questions will be asked? Both in asynchronous and synchronous interviews, we can ask questions such as biographical questions, technical questions that are directly related to the job, competency-based questions, or even languages depending on the requirement. For example, in the OSCE, there might be some opportunities in which the knowing how to speak Russian could be an asset. Meaning that if you state that you have working knowledge or advanced knowledge of Russian, we could potentially ask you a question in Russian and expect you to give us the answer in Russian as well. So I recommend people be extremely careful in actually stating their language competencies, because you may need to actually prove them when asked, when participating in interviews. And this is true for both asynchronous and synchronous interviews as well. I have a few resources for you so that you can follow up after this webinar. Please note that these come from copyrighted materials. That's why we are actually mentioning the individuals who produce these sources and have the copyrights. That means that this is not necessarily an endorsement by the Department of Human Resources or the OSCE, but it is simply a presentation of sources provided in online, and they show best practices. So you can find information, for example, from themuse.com on how to do a video meeting or Skype interview without feeling totally awkward. Another one is from job/hunt.org, 10 keys to success in one-way video interviews. And there's also this video on EAZL, E-A-Z-L, on YouTube that you can find more information on how to ace these interviews as well. Again, these are open source. These have not been created or endorsed by the OSCE, but these are just samples of best practices that you can find online very easily. One thing that I highly recommend for all of you actually participating in this webinar today, the recruitment unit created a talent acquisition newsletter, and now we have our second edition available that focuses on preparing for video pre-screening interviews. We're going to have our third session being released in early September. So if you want to find out more about the upcoming webinar of the month, if you want to receive tips for job applications, interviews, or even career management tips from best practices in private, public, and multilateral sectors, if you want to receive information on our open vacancies on a monthly basis, all you need to do is Google the following terms. Google OSCE, Talent Acquisition Newsletter, and all you have to do is actually go to the page and enter your email to subscribe, and every month you should receive not only information on the upcoming webinar of the month, but also real resources that you can use for your applications, not only for the OSCE, but pretty much for jobs in multilateral international organizations as well, since our processes tend to be quite similar. Now we are going to the question section. Please notice that Rebecca and I are here to answer your questions regarding SONRU preparation, regarding video pre-screening interviews, but we need to focus on the most generic questions possible so that we can actually cater to as many people as possible participating in this event. So we're going to give you a little time to enter the questions at the bottom right of your screen where you can see the chat box. I'm going to mute myself for a while to wait for the questions or select the questions, and I'll answer them myself or request Rebecca for some help. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer your questions. Okay, one question that I have is, what is the approximate timeline for the pre-screening interviews? Listen, pre-screening interviews are exactly what they are, pre-screening, okay? So they are used to help hiring managers and the panel determine who to move forward in the process. This is a way for us to find out more information from you and potential candidates to decide whether or not to make individuals go through a pre-written test or invite them for direct interviews with an anonymous test or not, which means that this can happen in the long listing process. However, it could be also possible for us to use pre-recorded video interviews after. However, the most important piece of information for you is the following. This does not substitute for the live interview, which could happen both on video or in person as well. Another question that I have here is, the answers of the interviewee must be given orally, vocally, via the screening, or can we give them in a written way? In the case of video pre-screening interviews, they need to be given orally, and they need to be given on camera, because this is part of the pre-screening process. Again, we go through a lot of training and we get a lot of information to actually be assessing your answers and not necessarily anything that may be going on your background. Your job is to make sure that you minimize any kind of distractions in your background so that we can focus on your answers only. Okay? Let's look for another question right now.
Gustavo, I actually see one there asking about internet connection.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so what kind of internet connection is required? So on SONRU, the actual requirement for bandwidth is 140 kilobits per second. So that is less than your average Skype call. So the asynchronous part requires a very low bandwidth because we are very aware, and especially for organizations such as you mentioned that you're often in you can be in very remote places, we accommodate that. And even if it drops a tiny bit below the 140 kilobits, the system will try and reconnect so that you won't be interrupted and can record successfully.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now let's take a look. How can I be sure that I'm listened by the interviewer? Listen, if you are invited for a video pre-screening interview, it's because we are interested in you, meaning that we will review your interview. We would not be inviting anyone to participate in the interview if not. If you mean that in a metaphorical way, that's the answer. If you mean that in a practical way, how can I make sure that they hear me? You will have the opportunity to actually practice the SONRU interview before taking the actual recorded interview, and you will be able to watch yourself on video if you so choose to do. So that's why we know that that's what happens. A question we have, could you please reply? How long does it take from application submission to invitation for the SONRU interview? This varies dramatically from recruitment process to recruitment process, especially if it is a internationally contracted to a seconded position. For those of you not familiar with the OSCE, seconded positions are actually processed by the participating states, and they are the ones who actually send us nominations, which means that we are waiting on participating states to send us who they think we should be considering, and that's when we make a decision. As for internationally contracted positions, we make the decisions here or in the missions regarding the long list. Typically, our processes last less than many other multilateral organizations. In the year of 2017, for example, from a VN publication to a candidate acceptance, it took us an average of 125 days. And if you look at other international organizations, it can be up to double. However, these are just averages, and it varies from organization to organization. Again, we are reaching the end of the webinar today. We very much appreciate the participation of everyone from many participating states across the OSCE region, and we highly recommend that you actually Google Talent Acquisition Newsletter OSCE so that you can register, subscribe to our newsletter so that you can receive monthly updates on our webinar of the month. On behalf of Lisa Sutton, who is the Director of the Office of Internal Oversight here, I want to thank those who actually participated, and especially to SONRU for providing us with the superb support of Rebecca Gangnus, who is always there to help. So here from Vienna and also from Ireland, we say goodbye and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.